that day when I met him, through the course of a conversation about our faith, I realized that Byron had something very unique and something very different than what I had experienced in my life. Because you see, I looked at God as somebody who was this big granddaddy off in the sky that blessed you when you were good and punished you when you were bad. That was my concept of God. And somehow, if I could just be good enough, I wouldn't get punished at all. And now Byron was challenging me to do something that at that point in my life, I don't know that I had ever done. And he simply asked me to read the Bible to discover who I am in relationship to God. And I thought, why wouldn't I do that? Why wouldn't I read this book, this amazing book called the Bible, to discover who I am in relationship to God? And so I went on a journey that summer. And this is how I sum up my salvation experience. Because it was that summer that I was introduced to God in a very unique way. You see, all of a sudden, God was no longer off in a distance. He was very personal. Because now I was reading about this incredible, incredible person, Jesus. And what he did for me by coming to this earth, living a perfect life, a sinless life, and then going to the cross and dying for my sins, a perfect man and God, dying for my sin so that I would be forgiven and have life. That is what I've come to learn and understand about my Christian faith, is the amazing gift that God gave to this world, to all of us, through His Son Jesus. And it was that summer that I realized that in my desperation as a sinful man, because when I look in the mirror, I know who I am. Ladies and gentlemen, truthfully, we all know we're sinners in this room. Every one of us. And we're all desperate. But what's so beautiful about God is that He intervenes. This loving God intervenes on our behalf. And He dies this brutal death on the cross, shedding His blood, a perfect sacrifice, so that we would have life and be forgiven. And a dear pastor friend of mine defined it this way: when you take our desperation and you add God's intervention, it equals amazing grace. Yes. And that summer in Amarillo, Texas, I embraced the amazing grace through the person of Jesus and became a follower of His. The most amazing gift after that was that my wife actually experienced this with me. And that was the second greatest gift they ever received. And then my kids followed afterwards, and that was so cool. Being a dad was the most amazing thing in the universe, and now I'm a grandpa. And you talk about amazing. The kids part was okay. The grandkids part is awesome. It's awesome. So the bottom line is that now all of a sudden I'm embarking on this new journey, this new life, and I'm a baseball player and I'm having a ball, and 1982 rolls around after Amarillo and I make it to Hawaii. I mean, how cool is that? I mean, our daughter is born in Hawaii. And 2 days after her birth, the Padres call me up and say, "You're going to the big leagues." I mean, you couldn't get any better than that. 1983, I'm in an all-star game. I'm alongside some of the greatest baseball players that have ever played the game. And I'm one of those guys on that all-star team. 1984, we go to the World Series. We are in postseason play right now, and everybody understands the excitement of the Athletics and the Giants in postseason play and hoping that it's another Bay Bridge series. How cool would that be? And I had the privilege of being in a World Series. Do you know Ernie Banks, one of the greatest baseball players to ever play the game and is in the Hall of Fame, has never been in a World Series? And in my third season in the big leagues, I was in the World Series. Now, we lost. Matter of fact, the Detroit Tigers just kicked the tar out of us. But you know what I discovered? The losers get a really nice ring, too. And I have 2 losers' rings that I'm really proud of. 1987, I get traded from a last-place team in the Padres to the first-place Giants. We go into postseason play. I pitched the 2 best games of my career against the St. Louis Cardinals in the '87 playoffs. And we didn't make it to the World Series, but 1988 was going to be my year. My life was good. I mean, it was amazing. I have this relationship with God. I have a wonderful wife. I have a wonderful family, 2 beautiful kids. I'm playing out this wonderful dream as a Major League Baseball player. Couldn't get any better. 1988 rolls around, opening day. Chavez Ravine, Dodger Stadium. Picture this. Dave Dravecky versus Fernando Valenzuela. You couldn't have painted a better picture than that. As a matter of fact, in Mexico, one of the newspapers had me faced off with Fernando, and we had boxing gloves on. And it was this battle on opening day in Dodger Stadium, and guess who won that day? Me! Or I should say the Giants. I didn't do it by myself. But we defeated Fernando and the Dodgers 5-1 that day, and I thought I was on my way to winning 20 games. And folks, I'm sure many of you who are in this room will remember this moment in your story. Because by September of 1988, a small lump had developed on the outside of my arm. And the doctors are now telling me I have cancer. And all of a sudden, my world comes crashing down. Even as a Christian. Because you know what, folks? I'm not a robot. All of a sudden, because God enters into my life and transforms me, doesn't mean I became a robot when that happened. Or you push some button and I get up in the morning and everything's perfect every day. That's not my world. My world is messed up. And in this moment, it was really messed up because now at 32 years of age, I'm face to face with my own mortality. Talk about scary. I don't want to die. And being human, and the fact that God's responsible for making me human, He also wired me with all the emotions of a human being. Fear, anger, frustration, worry. All those things. Because it was a very real part of my story. And as I looked at life, I didn't want to leave it. It felt too good to be alive. And now all of a sudden I'm dealing with life and death. And I'm wondering, if I die from this disease, who is going to marry my wife? And then I thought, that jerk's going to sleep in my bed next to my wife. And I didn't like that thought. And then I thought to myself, oh my gosh, he's going to be the father of my children. And then I went right to this whole thing about, will this guy love my wife and kids like I do? As much as I do? And you know what, ladies and gentlemen? The scariest thought came when all of a sudden I had to look in the mirror and ask myself, will this guy love them more? Because I know who I am. And I haven't been the best husband. I haven't been the best father. And I got a wake-up call that day. The doctors came in, and as I look at this card, I'll never forget the words that came out of their mouth. Outside of a miracle, you will never pitch again. And a lot of people have asked, why did you even try to come back and pitch, Dave? Why? And I look at people when they ask that question and say, how could I not try? For me to have walked away at that point and turned my back on baseball without even trying, how could I live with that for the rest of my life? Ladies and gentlemen, I had no choice. I had to try. And in the midst of that, in the best way that I could, and it wasn't very good at times, I had to trust God with the uncertainty of my story, the uncertainty of my journey, because I didn't know what the future held. As much as I wanted to see it unfold the way it ultimately did, I didn't know that it would. And so for the next 10 months, I went on this incredible journey of highs and lows. I can't tell you how many times I figuratively ran into a brick wall and got a bloody nose. But there were wonderful people alongside of me who kept picking me up and saying, "Don't quit, Dave. Don't quit. Don't give up." And so I would press on and I would move forward. And with the encouragement of those amazing people, with my wife at the very top of the list, on August 10th, 1989, 10 months after I was told outside of a miracle I'll never pitch, I was standing on the mound pitching again. And this incredible miracle had taken place. I was pitching. This is the actual picture of that day, August 10th, 1989, ladies and gentlemen. This is the comeback game picture. And I look at this card and I go, "God, you are amazing." Because in the midst of all the highs and the lows, in the midst of all the stuff that went on, you brought some amazing people into my life. Doctors, nurses, therapists, physical therapists, trainers, that worked on this body to get it back to a place where I could pitch again. And now I was. And it was overwhelming. 5 days later, as you saw in the video, I threw a pitch and my left arm snaps in half. My career comes to an end. And you know what's really amazing, ladies and gentlemen? What I want to tell you in this particular part of my story really defines and I believe exposes the reality that God is alive and is who He says He is. And this is what I want to tell you. This is what I want to tell you, because I'll never forget sitting with Bob Nepper, a teammate of mine, right before I broke my arm. We were at dinner. And it was before the ball game. And he looked at me and we were talking about the comeback game. And after the comeback game, it was amazing. I was in front of the press and they were talking to me about my comeback. And, "Dave, how do you feel about this?" And I just took a moment and I said, "You know what? I just want to take this opportunity to thank my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ for the privilege it is to be back here playing again, because of all the people that He used in my life to help me get here." Because you see, that's how I believe God shows up, folks, through us. But now all of a sudden, Bob Nepper's looking at me as we're talking about how great this miracle of the comeback is. And he looks at me and he says, "I hate to burst your bubble, but it's not the miracle of the comeback that's so important. It's the miracle of salvation that occurred in your life in Amarillo, Texas. And what God is doing is providing a platform for you through baseball to share His love with those who hurt." And I looked at Bob and I said, "You're nuts." I said, "All I want to do is be a pitcher. I'm back in the game." 5 hours later, I am laying on the ground with a broken arm. And guess whose words I heard? Bob Nepper's words. God has given you a platform through baseball to share His love with those who hurt. The next morning, before I left Montreal, I was asked to go to a press conference. And this is the reason why I tell you this part of the story. The very first question from the very first reporter sitting in this suite where we were having this press conference, the very first question out of that reporter's mouth was, "Where is your God now?"
Oh my gosh.
And ladies and gentlemen, that should be a rejoicing and a clapping, because it's the most important question in the universe. Because it's easy when you're on the mountaintop to say God is good. But now all of a sudden I've got a broken arm. My career has come to an end. Cancer has reoccurred. And can I now say that God is still good? Because I'm in the valley. I'm in the pit of life. And it's not good right now. I'm hurting. And I've got to go back to San Francisco and hear the doctors tell me the rest of the story. And I looked that man in the eyes and I said, "You know what? God hasn't gone anywhere. He's always been right here in my heart. And He's there when I'm on the mountaintop, and He's there when I'm in the valley."